Bond. James Bond.
After starring in the role of 007 in the first 5 Bond movies, Sean Connery pretty much cemented himself in the status of being the one and only James Bond. And lots of people would still claim this to this very day. I'm probably one of those people myself actually. But Connery stepped away from Bond, wanting to pursue other roles and focus on the rest of his career. So the producers were left without their leading star. They must have really feared for the future of the franchise at that stage. But Cubby Broccoli was convinced that James Bond was bigger than the actor that played him. The search for an actor to follow up Sean Connery in the 6th Bond movie had started. Lots of actors were considered for the part. Timothy Dalton was offered the role, but he turned it down, feeling he was too young to play the role. You have to give him credit for that move. He actually turned down the role of James Bond during that time, something that would have really launched his career at that point. I would have never been able to turn that offer down. Of course, decades later he would eventually be Bond anyway, but I'll get to that in a much later episode. So, which actor did end up with the part? The answer is no actor. No, the role went to an Australian male model called George Lazenby. Yeah, you heard that right. The legendary Sean Connery was followed up by a male model that had no acting experience and had only starred in some commercials before. Imagine that happening nowadays. Imagine the new Bond would just be some random dude that had advertised boxer shorts or jeans or something. I mean, what were they thinking? It's not that I dislike Lazenby just for actually getting the part. As a matter of fact, I find his story of how he managed to become Bond to be hilarious and clever.
How did you get involved with Her Majesty's Secret Service?
Well, it started out with a friend of mine wanted to be an actor. He was Australian, and we were having a threesome with this girl. And that's how it started. Everything. I lucked out. I went to Connery's barber, who was right down the road from where I worked at Mercedes-Benz, and that's where I used to get my hair cut. And he said he cut Sean Connery's hair. I said, give me a haircut like Connery. So I had long sideburns, French hat, long hair, you know. He said, no, you got beautiful hair. I said, just like Sean Connery's haircut, give it to me. And the barber said, okay. You know, practically shorn my head off. And then I went to his tailor. I found out off the barber where his tailor was. And they said, 6 months to make a suit. And I said, 6 months? Forget it. And I was about to walk, hey, hang on, I got one here he didn't want. So now I've got Connery's suit, and he had to let the sleeves down half an inch. I've already owned a Rolex. I had his hair cut, and I was waiting outside the casting office until she ducked under the desk, and I went choom upstairs, and she said, hey, you come back here, come back. And Dyson Lovell, fortunately, was on the phone with Harry Saltzman. Otherwise, he would have found out I was a phony. And I'm standing at the door with my watch showing, leaning on the doorway, and he says, who are you? I said, I heard you're looking for James Bond. And so, he said, tell me your life story. What have you done? Where have you been? Because he didn't want to go into Harry with no information. I said, I was working in China and Connecticut, Yugoslavia and Latvia, and everywhere I could think of that was someplace I thought they wouldn't check on. But anyway, the next morning I get in there, and I don't know what made me do it. I looked at Peter, and I could see he was fuming. And he said, well, tell me your life story. And I said, well, first of all, I got to tell you, I've never acted in my life. And he went, what? He said, you've never acted in your life? He said, stick to your story and I'll make you the next James Bond. You've just fooled two of the most ruthless men I've ever met in my life.
Yup, so basically Lazenby just lied his way in. I mean, props to him for being able to do that. He fooled and impressed Harry Saltzman. Now of course this is a great and awesome story and all, but I don't know what made the producers decide to stick with him anyway. I mean, soon enough he did confess he wasn't an actor, but they just went with him anyway. So ultimately, out of all the actors that were considered, he was the one that became Sean Connery's predecessor. Anyway, on Her Majesty's Secret Service, the novel the producers had already wanted to film previously, was now finally up to become the 6th official James Bond movie. This is often called one of Fleming's best Bond novels, along with From Russia with Love. And Peter Hunt, who had previously worked as the editor on the first 3 Bond movies and as the assistant director on the previous movie, was chosen to direct this film. Hunt was eager to make sure he put his unique stamp on this one. So here we have one of Fleming's best novels in combination with an ambitious director and an unknown male model starring in the role of James Bond. How did this movie do and how do I feel about it? Let's examine this. Starting with the gun barrel, this movie already feels different and unique. Not only is the broccoli and Saltzman tag presented again, but Lazenby's gun barrel stance is very different, and so is him disappearing behind the blood. It's not really anything significant of course, but might have been worth pointing out. The movie opens up at MI6, where nothing really noteworthy happens besides M and Q talking and wondering where 007 is at. So we find out that he's out in Portugal, cruising around the coastline in his new Aston Martin DBS. Great car, by the way. There's a chick overtaking him in a red Mercury Cougar and Bond decides to follow her. Since we have a new actor in the role of Bond, his face is not revealed yet, so we get some small glimpses of him instead, which I really like. The girl has parked up at the beach and appears to be walking towards the sea, and Bond just goes around checking her out. Oh boy, whew, this one has some splendid assets. Ah, great taste in shoes too. Ooh, gotta love the legs. Ha! Hey, what the devil? She isn't wearing a bikini. Holy shit, this must be suicide then. So Bond rushes in to rescue the girl and grabs her as she's walking into the water, and all of a sudden she seems to be unconscious. I mean, seriously? How? The water was barely reaching her thighs. She was nowhere near drowning. But yeah, Bond wakes her up, and it's here that Lazenby gives his introduction.
Good morning. My name's Bond. James Bond.
And I already find him to be wooden. I always have to get used to that no matter how many times I watch this movie. So some unknown thugs show up and hold a gun at Bond, and a fight breaks loose, and even though Bond and the thug are clearly not in the middle of the water when Bond throws his punch, but after the guy falls down, all of a sudden they are in the middle of the sea, which I always thought was a bit stupid and fake. I know it makes the fight more dramatic, but it comes off more as 2 men practicing judo in a dramatic way. Anyway, Bond takes care of the thugs, and instead of having sex on the beach with the chick he just rescued, she actually just drives off, leaving Bond behind to utter this line.
This never happened to the other fella.
This never happened to the other fellow, as in Sean Connery. Did they really have to break the fourth wall like that? To me, it's one of the most cringe-worthy, stupidest lines in the Bond series. He's supposed to be the same character as Connery. Why do this? I have to say, this whole pre-title sequence to me was a poor start to the movie, despite the actual material from Fleming used here on paper being very strong, but on film, this just wasn't executed that well at all. The opening title sequence, by the way, is purely instrumental, another thing being quite unique at this stage. The visuals are also different, showcasing some flashbacks from the previous 5 Bond movies, kind of recapping the adventures that came previously. After the opening, we see Bond going back to his hotel, only to find the red Mercury Cougar from the girl parked outside there. He walks in, wearing a really nice looking suit by the way, and asks who the car belongs to, and finds out the girl is named Contessa Teresa di Vincenzo, or simply Tracy. In the night, Bond goes out to the casino, and again, it's here that I really have to get used to Lazenby even just walking. Remember Connery's first scene in Dr. No with his smooth manners and just walking around with a certain presence and suaveness. And Lazenby isn't even suave enough to fasten his own jacket. I don't mean to pick on the guy that much or anything, but I guess it would have really helped if Terrence Young was around to teach Lazenby some suaveness in the same way he had helped Connery before. Anyway, Bond is doing some gambling and Tracy shows up again and joins in on the game, only to lose a lot of money. Bond is being a gentleman and pays off the money for her, rescuing her a second time. So Bond and Tracy have a bit of a talk. And Tracy, by the way, is played by Diana Rigg, who is a great actress giving a fantastic performance, easily being the strongest leading Bond girl the series have had up until this point. She invites Bond over to her room so that she can thank him. So Bond goes up to her room and another one of the unknown thugs shows up and attacks him, and in my opinion this fight is a lot better than the one in the ocean. After beating him up, he goes back to his own room only to have Tracy show up in a hot robe, testing Bond by pointing his own gun at him. She was probably wondering why Bond has a gun, but Bond easily overpowers her and starts asking her questions about the thug in her room, of which she has no clue about, and she basically offers sex to pay off her debts of Bond rescuing her twice, and Bond initially refuses. Yeah, you go Bond, I'm impressed, show that chick you're not that easy after having her point your own gun at you and rescuing her twice. Play hard to get. I mean, it really took him a good 3 minutes before he actually decided to bang her on his balcony anyway. The next morning, Tracy has disappeared and somehow someone paid off the money that Bond paid for her in the casino. When he comes downstairs, the unknown thugs show up again and abduct Bond, and here I have to admit Lazenby is doing well and it's actually kind of funny the way he's so cheerful about his abduction. In the building they take Bond to, there is this midget cleaning the place while whistling the Goldfinger title song. You see that? Now if you want to break the fourth wall so badly, at least that's a more subtle way of doing it. So Bond is brought to the leader of the unknown thugs, and when he enters he's about to throw a knife, only to realize he knows who the guy is, and he throws the knife at a calendar instead, and it's stated that it's currently September in the movie, which I want to bring up again a little bit later in this video. The leader of these unknown thugs is revealed to be a man called Mark Ange Draco, head of a crime syndicate by the name of the Union Corps. But despite being a mob boss, he actually becomes an ally to Bond, so it's sort of like Bond teaming up with the Godfather. And it's revealed that Draco is the father of Tracy, and he heard about all the good things Bond did for her, and Draco is convinced that Bond can fix her emotional instability. She needs a man that can dominate her, as he puts it hilariously. So he wants Bond to marry her. He even wants to offer him £1 million for it, but Bond is not interested in money of course and refuses, but he is interested in information about the whereabouts of his arch nemesis Blofeld, the head of Spectre. So they make a deal that Bond gets the information if he keeps romancing Tracy. Then Bond finally returns to MI6 and there's this nice little scene between Bond and Moneypenny, which is a bit different than what we were used to from Connery and Moneypenny, so that's nice. And M informs Bond that he is relieved from Operation Bedlam, which was the operation to track down and kill Blofeld, so Bond naturally becomes pissed off about this and wants to resign from the Secret Service, so he asks Moneypenny to write his resignation letter. Meanwhile he's also cleaning up his own office and he has some memories from some items from the previous movies, which the filmmakers do for the reason of showing us that Lazenby's Bond is indeed the same character as Connery's Bond. I guess they had to put this scene in for making up for the stupid "this never happened to the other fellow" line or something. When Bond goes back to M, his request is granted, but it's revealed that Moneypenny didn't write a resignation letter for Bond but a request for 2 weeks leave instead, so now Bond can continue to track down Blofeld anyway. So Bond goes back to Portugal and visits Draco at his birthday party to try and get the information about Blofeld. Tracy of course is also there, clearly showing no interest in Bond whatsoever, but she is suspicious of why Bond is even at her father's birthday party, so she finds out her father has made a deal with Bond for information and she forces her father to give Bond the information that he needs. So Draco has no choice but to tell Bond that Blofeld has a connection with a law firm in Switzerland. And Tracy is of course upset that her father actually made a deal for someone to romance her, so she runs off in tears. And Bond has the information he needs now, but he goes after Tracy anyway and he comforts her, and then all of a sudden they become lovers. So out of nowhere we get this love montage of Bond and Tracy being deeply in love, set to some nice Louis Armstrong music, and that's very different and kinda cool to see Bond actually fall in love. But again, although this is some strong material used from Fleming here, in the movie the falling in love part just seems to be so sudden. I mean, 5 minutes ago Tracy didn't seem to care that much about Bond, and bam, a couple of minutes later they're looking for a wedding ring together in a romantic love montage. But yeah, so after that Bond goes out to investigate at the law firm in Switzerland and finds out what connection with Blofeld is hidden there. So he just walks into an office and cracks a safe open, but unlike the previous movie where he just had a safe cracker in his pocket, this time he needs the help of Draco's goons to actually bring a safe cracker in. He finds some papers and it's revealed that Blofeld is attempting to claim the title of a count, and he needs the confirmation of a genealogist, Sir Hilary Bray, to get this title. A genealogist being someone that researches family trees and ancestors and stuff. So Bond visits this Hilary Bray and they make a deal that Bond would be posing as Hilary Bray instead to go out and get closer to Blofeld. He even goes to M's house, which is pretty rare, to tell him that he's gathered all this valuable information, and M grants him permission to chase Blofeld again. So with that, Bond sets off on his mission posing as genealogist Sir Hilary Bray, while constantly being dubbed by a completely different voice whenever he is Hilary Bray.
Had a good journey? No, quite intolerable. I'm not a good traveller, I'm afraid.
And it's not like he's just undercover as Hilary Bray for a short while or anything. No, he's actually dubbed for a pretty damn long portion of the movie, and it's kind of annoying. Anyway, it's here that we're introduced to Irma Bunt, and it takes about 2 seconds of looking at her to realize that she's an evil woman. I mean, this is Rosa Klebb all over again, but she does seem to have some humor though.
Be glad to get my feet on the ground. Not ground. Eyes.
Bond is taken to Blofeld's research institute called Piz Gloria in the Swiss Alps, and while Bond is inside being undercover as Hilary Bray, he's wearing one of the weirdest outfits you'll ever see James Bond wear in the series. He meets up with 12 beautiful women from all around the world who are each patients of the Institute's clinic. And it's here that I always find the movie to become a bit jarring in its pacing. Keep in mind that apart from 2 small fight scenes, we had no action whatsoever yet. It's not that action is a must or anything, but I guess it's just something that I usually start to experience around this point of the movie. Maybe it's just me though. So Bond has dinner with these beautiful women and talks a little bit about genealogy, and one of the women called Ruby writes her room number on his leg.
Is anything the matter, Sir Hilary? Just a slight stiffness coming on in the shoulder.
So we get some corny jokes like that, which I guess are even less funny because it's so obviously not Lazenby's real voice at this point. But yeah, Bond also finally meets Blofeld and the two don't recognize each other, even though they clearly met face to face in the previous movie. The reason this continuation error occurs is because the filmmakers made such a faithful adaptation of the novel, and in the novel this normally was the first instance to have Bond actually encounter Blofeld face to face. So it doesn't really harm the film on its own though, you know, on its own it's just fine. Blofeld, by the way, is now played by Telly Savalas, who I think is more suited for the role than Donald Pleasence was. He's a bit more menacing, and also he has this really weird way of holding a cigarette all the time. It just always seems to get my attention whenever he does that. Of course, Bond still has the room number written on his leg, so he visits Ruby in her room and he decides to bang her while he's at it. Which I agree it's a typical Bond thing to do, but since he's now kind of in a relationship with Tracy and all, it seems kind of stupid and unnecessary for his mission. But this is the way that Bond does find out that Blofeld is brainwashing these women in his clinic by using hypnotizing ceilings in their rooms. And that whole thing just always seems to leave me rolling my eyes. When Bond returns to his own room, another one of the girls shows up, so since Bond is in such a dedicated relationship with Tracy, he just decides to bang this one on the same night. Again, it's a Bond thing, but it seems so unnecessary, and that's all Bond seems to be doing on Piz Gloria posing as Hilary Bray anyway, just constantly arranging his schedule of when to bang all the girls.
I must see you.
8 o'clock tonight.
I must see you tonight.
9 o'clock. 10. Well, back to work. You've no idea how it's piling up.
So in the evening, Bond decides to hit room number 8 again, and this little scene comes on.
Hilly's so sad that Ruby's leaving. Has that old cow told you? Fancy meeting you, Fräulein.
Imagine that happening to you. I would be scarred for life. I mean, that would fit even a horror movie. So it turns out that Bond's cover as Hilary Bray is blown and Blofeld has found out who he is.
Merry Christmas, 007.
Christmas? Wasn't it September during this movie? I know a couple of days have passed since, but not that many days, right? I mean, the scene with the calendar was taking place just before he got the 2 weeks leave, which was all in September, and he left for Piz Gloria shortly after. It's a weird plot hole, nothing significant, but worth pointing out. Blofeld reveals his dastardly plan, which is to send out his hypnotized girls from his clinic to spread a virus all around the world that causes infertility to plants, animals, and possibly even the human race. So, bacterial warfare, and he wants to threaten and ransom the world with it. And yeah, Blofeld's whole scheme, to me, it's just a bit meh, but could just be me. So Bond gets locked away, but of course he manages to make his escape with some skis. And at this point we're about 1 hour and a half into the movie, and finally we get the first real action scene, which in my opinion is so welcome at this point. And all the action in this movie, by the way, is really good. The skiing is great, and even Blofeld himself goes after Bond on skis. That's something I could never even imagine Donald Pleasant's Blofeld doing. He would just sit behind a desk and press some buttons and let his henchmen do all the work, but not Telly Savalas's Blofeld. There's also a part where Bond is just skiing on one ski while being chased by Blofeld's goons shooting at him, and I believe the guy doing this on one ski was actually an Olympic skier. Again, wonderfully well done stuff. Eventually Bond ends up in a nearby village during a winter festival, and this stuff is pretty tense as Bond actually seems helpless and fears for his life while he's being chased by Irma Bunt and all of Blofeld's men. And just as Bond almost seems to give up in the cold, Tracy shows up right in front of him, which is a great moment. Now she actually gets to save him too, so she actually drives the car while Bond is in the passenger seat, which is pretty cool. And she's a pretty good driver too. Okay, yes, he does end up bumping into a racetrack and stuff, but still.
Looks like we've hit the rush hour.
Also, Lazenby and the one-liners, not a good match. At least he's speaking in his own voice again though. So Tracy and Bond manage to shake off Irma Bunt and the rest and end up in a snowstorm and are forced to spend the night in a barn. And I have to say, this is probably my favorite scene in this movie. And honestly, Lazenby is pretty good in this scene too.
I love you. I know I'll never find another girl like you. Will you marry me?
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Bond actually proposes to a woman. I mean, that's pretty damn unique for a James Bond movie. Even though he banged half of the woman on top of Piz Gloria, but yeah, let's just take that aside. It's a great moment in the movie. The next morning the pair quickly leave on skis and are once again chased by Blofeld and his men, and once again this is some beautifully shot action here. I definitely cannot be negative about the cinematography of this movie. I mean, this stuff even inspired Christopher Nolan's Inception. But Blofeld causes an avalanche, causing Bond and Tracy to nearly be killed. Tracy gets taken by Blofeld and Bond survives and gets back to the office in London. At this point they hear Blofeld is ransoming the world with his virus and he wants to be recognized as a count and get amnesty for all the crimes he has done. Bond tries to convince M to blow up Piz Gloria, since that forms the radio complex from which the girls get their instructions to spread out the virus in the world. But M forbids 007 to do this and says the ransom shall be paid. So luckily Bond still has connections with Tracy's father, Draco, and with his help they fly over to Piz Gloria with a series of helicopters to rescue Tracy and blow the place up. And meanwhile Tracy is being kept hostage by Blofeld, and she once again shows that she's a great female character as she just totally messes with Blofeld. So Blofeld's radar picks up the helicopters of Draco, but Draco convinces them that they are on an emergency flight carrying victims and they are just flying over. And then they storm Piz Gloria, which is a great moment. There's the Bond theme kicking in, lots of shooting, and most of it is pretty good. Tracy is saved by her father and Bond blows the whole place up. I never really got how that actually stopped Blofeld's plan though. I mean, he has his hypnotized girls already spread around all over the world. They have the virus with them, so I don't know, couldn't he just build a new radio somewhere else? That always seems so flawed to me. But yeah, more action kicks in of Blofeld escaping and Bond chasing him down, which leads to more action on a bobsled, and it even has Blofeld and Bond fighting on one. The effects here are quite dated, but it's not bad. Eventually Blofeld gets caught in a tree and Lazenby tries to be funny again.
He's branched off.
So Blofeld just gets stuck on a tree, and to me it always seemed like Bond really didn't complete any mission at all by the end of this movie. It always seemed like Blofeld could just carry out his plans somewhere else, but yeah, what do I know. We get to the final scene of the movie, which is of course Tracy and Bond's wedding, which is a pretty special moment. There are great moments here where Draco is talking with M about stuff in the past together, and Q and Moneypenny are there, and she's all emotional and such, of course. It's really unique. And the married couple drives off towards their honeymoon, and as they do so, they take a break at a beautiful coastline, fantasizing about their great future together and about all the kids they're gonna have and whatnot. And then Blofeld and Irma Bunt show up and they do a drive-by. And with that, Bond's lawfully wedded wife is murdered. It's very tragic. I have to admit that Lazenby again did some good acting in this scene.
There's no hurry, you see. We have all the time in the world.
And with that sad note, the movie comes to an end. I always thought it was a bit of a shame that the cheerful Bond theme just kicks in like that over the credits though. I mean, I would have preferred the instrumental version of All the Time in the World, or at least something like that. See, that was just an example of how the ending could have been even more powerful than it already was, but you know, it's not really something I'm holding against the movie or anything. Fans often proclaim On Her Majesty's Secret Service to be the best Bond movie in the franchise. They see it as the absolute pearl. I see it ranked at the top of fellow fans' list everywhere, and I can see why people like it so much. Unfortunately, I'm not as fond of this movie as most people are, and I honestly wish the movie would grow on me a bit more, but there's just a lot of stuff I really dislike about this one. Okay, so first let's talk about all the good stuff. Diana Rigg is great as Tracy. She was already an established actress at the time, and she was obviously casted to make up for Lazenby's lack of experience, and she definitely did a great job. I also really like Gabriel Forseti as Draco. Great and memorable ally. The cinematography and most of the action is good in the movie too, and so is the great tragic ending. I'm so glad they went with the original ending of the novel. I mean, they could have also went with the happy ending of Bond and Tracy driving off on their honeymoon and have her be killed at the start of the next Bond movie, but no, they went with the sad ending, and that's a really brave and great move. But what I really dislike about the movie is the actual plot. Blofeld's scheme of causing infertility with hypnotized women seems so flawed, and that's a major part of the movie after all. I'm also not a big fan of Bond just banging all the women on Piz Gloria even though he's supposed to be in love with Tracy. The biggest downside to this movie for me is probably Lazenby. He has a few good acting scenes, but most of it is just really wooden, and it doesn't help that he's dubbed for a large portion of the movie either. Would I have enjoyed the movie more had Connery done this one? Probably, and most definitely, but that's something we'll never know. On Her Majesty's Secret Service is indeed the most faithful adaptation of one of Fleming's best novels that the filmmakers brought onto the big screen, but to me that doesn't automatically make it one of the best Bond movies too. I know this movie has a lot of fans, and like I said, I wish I liked it more myself, but I'm just merely sharing my 2 cents here as always, so don't let me stop you from still loving this movie yourself.
Diamonds are forever